Hello, everyone. Good evening, or good morning, or afternoon, as the case may be. I am John DeGoes, founder of the ZIO project and also CEO of Zyverge. And it is my great pleasure today to welcome you to this panel on migrating from Akka to ZIO. So I'm super happy that tonight my colleague and also ZIO core contributor Kit Langton is going to be the host for tonight's panel. But before I hand things over to him, let's talk just for a second about why we're here today. So ultimately, the answer for why we're here is Lightbend. Lightbend on September 7th put out a blog post announcing that they were changing the licensing of the entire Akka ecosystem from Apache 2 to the so-called business software license. And the interesting thing about BSL is that it is not an open source license. And it applies to Akka, but well, basically the entire Akka ecosystem and anything derived from these software projects as defined by the BSL. And according to this new BSL, if you want to use the new version, the latest up-to-date version of the Akka software, from the Lightbend Corporation, then you have to acquire a commercial license. And the pricing for that commercial license is around $2,000 per core, which means that if you're running 50 nodes in the cloud, then you could be set back by pricing that starts at around $38 million annually, depending on how many cores you have per node. So that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And also this change is very abrupt. It happened, I think, quite suddenly. So some companies, not everyone, but a lot of companies out there and a lot of developers are freaking out a bit. They're panicking a little bit and they're wondering what to do, right? That's a massive change. Overnight, an open source software project went to closed source effectively. And if you want to keep using this software and receive bug updates and security fixes and feature enhancements and the next version, all that stuff, then you could be on the hook for a large amount of money. So you're wondering what to do, and that brings me to the topic of tonight's panel. Before I tell you why we are here, let me tell you why we're not here. So we are not here, number one, to bash Lightbend, okay? So companies have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. Okay, it is their obligation to maximize return on investment to their shareholders. And it's very easy for, I think, all of us members of the peanut gallery, including myself, to pass judgment on Lightbend and say, hey, is that a good decision? Is that a bad decision? Is it going to help the business? Is it going to hurt the business? Is it going to help the open source? Is it going to hurt open source? We all have our opinions on this, but ultimately, none of us have an inside view of what's going on at the Lightbend Corporation. We can't say what's going on. Maybe this is the best decision for them, right? So I want to approach it with that perspective and say that I wish Lightbend the absolute best of luck building a really big and successful business on top of whatever sort of strategy, closed source or otherwise, they pursue going forward. And second, we are not here tonight to bash Akka, right? Akka is a robust, very robust, well-documented, mature, industry-proven technology that can be used to solve a whole host of problems in the development of sort of modern, reactive, cloud-native applications. Akka is great technology. And obviously, us functional programmers have a different view of how you put together a back-end stack than Akka. But at the end of the day, there's no doubt that Akka is good software. It is well-tested. It is proven. And if Akka meets your needs, and if you can afford, why not just get the commercial license, right? Because doing so, if you do that, and lots of other companies do that, it obviously ensures that that software that you like, that you depend on, will be around forever. If people are paying money, it's going to be around forever. So that's what I would encourage you to do. If you're happy about this new arrangement, if you can afford to license that software commercially, why not just keep on doing what you're doing? But if you're sort of in a different camp and you're a little concerned about maybe Lightbend's stability or the stability of Akka, or you're just in a position where you can't convince anyone, or maybe it's in fact true that the amount of money you would have to pay to Lightbend is sort of not worth it, then you might be looking around for open source alternatives to the ZIO ecosystem. And that's basically why we're here, is because we're here, at least some of us are here, to talk about how 100% open source ZIO ecosystem might be able to help. But let's be real. So ZIO is great. I founded ZIO. I obviously believe in ZIO a lot. I work on ZIO a huge amount, but ZIO is less documented, considerably less documented than Akka. It's also less complete. It's way newer than Akka, so the ecosystem is not as fully built out. It's also less mature. So a lot of the projects in the ZIO ecosystem are very new. Some of them are 12 months old. ZIO itself has only had a sort of a stable release for a little over 2 years, right? That's pretty darn new. And it's also less proven, even though we do have a lot of big companies using ZIO in production, including Disney and Capital One and lots of other really big companies. You can't really compare that with all the adoption that Akka has had over the past decade. Really, they're in Apple, they're in Tesla, they're in all these really big companies and really powerful, very heavy-duty use cases. Despite all of that, however, I do believe that if we're talking about a Scala cloud-native application stack, then my personal opinion is that ZIO is the future. It is a fusion of functional programming and object-oriented programming that really tries to combine, I think, the pragmatism of Akka with the purity of Haskell, right? The good parts of both of those ecosystems. It's trying to do something new. And I believe that it is and will continue to open up commercial functional programming like never before. But that, of course, is my view. And hopefully you did not come here to this panel to hear my view. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to turn it over to Kit. You're going to hear a ton today, I think, from ZIO contributors, fellow ZIO contributors, and also ZIO users and Akka users and some Akka users who decided to try ZIO and learn a bit about their experiences. And you're going to hear about roadmaps. You're going to hear about strengths. You're going to hear about weaknesses. You're going to hear about migrations to ZIO from Akka, hiring challenges, training challenges, all the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it takes to move a project from the Akka ecosystem to the ZIO ecosystem. And my hope is that by the end of this panel, all of you who are in that position of saying, hey, we got to look around and see if there's something else out there because we can't either, we have stability concerns or we just can't afford the licensing. My hope is that all of you today are very well informed, or at least better informed at the end of this panel on if and how an ecosystem like ZIO might be useful for some of the use cases that you have. So with that introduction, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Kit, who's going to kick things off for us. Kit?
Hello. Thank you very much, John. I see some hands in that little attendees panel and some questions already rolling in, which is amazing. And we're going to get to your questions. But just to let everyone know, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to ask them in either the Zoom question thingy and or in the Discord that I sent, and we'll be collecting those and collating them, and we'll be having a nice solid chunk of user audience questions at the end. Just gonna make sure I can proofread them and say them out loud correctly first and all that. But first, obviously, we have to introduce everyone. So yeah, just a couple notes on the organization. First, we're going to introduce all of these wonderful faces potentially hovering around me, depending on your Zoom settings. And then we're going to start with just some prepared questions that we have prepared ahead of time. So not from you. So maybe they'll seem in your eyes maybe biased or skewed. Who knows? But hopefully these are nice seeds of conversation. And as John sort of prefaced at the beginning, we're trying to be honest and sort of be realistic in this challenge, right? A player like Akka sort of obviating itself under certain circumstances is not easily replaced, right? It's a behemoth, a large project. And so yeah, we're gonna grapple with that, the potential void, unless you have millions of dollars to keep that void not a void. Okay, yes, just to let's get started then with talking about some panelists. So let's start with Adam Fraser to get me some hosting practice. Adam Fraser, my coworker and friend, who is a solution architect at ZiO. I actually wasn't sure of what your title was. I didn't know what you did around here, but you're a solution architect. So yeah, could you say maybe a few words of how do you relate? How do you fit into this Akka ZIO nexus?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a co-founder of ZiO along with John and Sandra, who helped organize this fantastic event. And I'm also a core contributor to ZIO. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we make ZIO better. And since this news about Akka came out, I've been spending a lot of time thinking and writing code to help people who are potentially coming from Akka find the solutions they need with ZIO. And I'm really excited to talk to everyone today.
It's good to have you here, Adam. Fraser. Okay. Next on my little list here, Jakub Czuchnowski, who is the CTO/tech priest at Scala-C or Scalac, or however you'd like to pronounce it, who also has contributed extensively to ZIO SQL and obviously helps run a company and does a whole bunch of things I'm sure that I don't know about. Yeah, how do you fit into this nexus?
Thanks, Kate, for introduction. How do I fit? Well, we started Scala in 2014, and pretty much Akka back then was the go-to solution for most of the projects and the most popular ecosystem. So I wasn't always CTO. I started as a developer, and I was building Akka systems since then. And then I joined. I got interested in ZIO around 2019, so almost from the beginning, I would say. And yeah, now help building both worlds, Akka and Akka systems and ZIO systems. And as you mentioned, I mostly contribute to ZIO SQL right now.
Awesome. Well, yes, very much looking forward to you sharing your experience when we get to the questions then. But thank you, Jakub. Great. And yeah, also awesome seeing a lot of questions come in, very thoughtful and long ones. Excited to get to those later on. So next, Jan, Ypma, welcome back. I know I got to introduce your talk back at Functional Scala 2021. That was really fun, and it was actually kind of relevant. I think the name of your talk was moving from Akka to ZIO, so you were
pretty much. I saw the light.
You knew something was coming.
No, that was happily unrelated. But yeah. So yeah, I'm an independent software architect, currently doing a project that started out with Akka, and we actually branched off to ZIO a while back, like a year or so ago, a bit longer maybe. For technological reasons back then, just the potential simplicity of certain things we were doing that would look neater in ZIO with respect to Akka. Before that, I've had a lot of other projects in Akka, both on the Java and Scala side. So yeah, looking forward to see what discussions today can bring.
Definitely, yeah. Since you've had a lot of experience with Akka, it'd be good to know later on about sort of its strengths too, and what we need to get better solutions for in the ZIO world. But thank you very much, Jan.
I do have a little list. So
you have a list? Okay, awesome, amazing. Ivan, Subotic. Hopefully, yes. I did not. Welcome.
Yes.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I appreciate your smiling face down there and your beautiful beard, if I may say
yes,
so.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yes. So I've done a little bit of research, so I'll just throw out some things, and then you can correct me and expand further. But you were a software engineer at DASH, which is the Swiss National Data and Service Center for the Humanities, which sounds very interesting and important. And you have a PhD in computer science, where your dissertation was a distributed archival network for process-oriented autonomic long-term digital preservation, which sounds like, maybe you could use Akka or ZIO for that. I don't know. But yeah, can you expand a little bit on that?
Yes.
On yourself.
So I mean, but I actually used Akka in my PhD, so that's why we then used Akka as the dash. So no, beginning with Akka 1 point something. So yes, at a dash, so data service center, here long-term preservation of humanities research data, and we use Akka. So we started with the software that we are working on now since 2014, and at that point we started with Akka 2 point something. And yes, so and since a year I was looking, can we do something different, bit better, different architecture, and then I came up to ZIO, and I mean also the other libraries that are out there, but I stuck with ZIO. So since a year or so, I'm on ZIO.
Okay.
Or we are on ZIO. So yes, so I'm also interested in to see what the discussion is going to bring, and so let's see.
Okay, amazing. Well, it's good to have you, Ivan. And next up, Michael Arnaldi, who we've met a couple times now. It's good to have you here. Michael, I'll give you once again my attempts at an introduction, then I'll let you fill in the blanks and correct and expand where you see fit. But I think your notable achievements are basically building this thing called Effect for TS, which is I think essentially started as kind of the ZIO for TypeScript, but I think has evolved and has led you down all sorts of crazy paths, including developing a new language called TypeScript Plus, which allows you to do, I think, even fancier sort of compile time tricks, and gaining some of the niceties and improving the ergonomics of TypeScript. And you're also the founder of Matex. Matech's? I'm not entirely sure about the pronunciation, so correct me. But yeah, it's awesome to have you here. You're sort of our parallel dimension, our dimensional reflection into the world of TypeScript. So yeah, I'm sure you're here to convince people to use Effect instead of Akka. But no, I won't put words in your mouth.
I actually, first of all, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invite. It's always a pleasure to kind of come back from the parallel universe. Actually, I have to say that this evening is actually on a topic that is the reason why Effect was made in the first place. So in what feels like a lifetime ago, I was in a CTO of a company that ended up in a process where we were finishing credits on cloud providers, and we got a little bit addicted to spend a lot of money on cloud resources. When we realized that we actually had to pay for those resources after, we found ourselves with a run rate that was absolutely impossible to survive. The whole system was wrote in using Akka and Lagoon at the time, and we did a first pass migration into a very, very early, I would say that was probably the time where John started taking out the project from Scala Z. I don't remember if it was already a bifunctor or it was even a monofunctor at that point in time. And the first results was better. Well, I'll share after what those results were, but then we did a second pass on the migration where some parts of the system that didn't need the full power of the JVM, we migrated to a Node.js environment, and that's where I took inspiration to make Effect out of ZIO. So that's tonight is the very whole reason why I actually have a parallel universe.
Thank you, Akka, once again.
Thank you, Akka, once again. Yeah.
It's good to have you, Michael. And well, John, I will not introduce you in the interest of time. I think people know who you are now. But yeah, with that, I think everyone has been accounted for, unless I skipped someone. No, I didn't. Great. Oh, and me. Yeah, I'm Kit. I also work at ZiVerge, so I like ZIO a lot. To expose my own biases, I guess at the very beginning of my Scala journey, I looked at Akka a little bit, and I was a little, to be honest, frightened by some of the terms. And you know, this is back before I was biased. You know, it was just a random experiment. Me 3 years ago, I was put in the wilderness and I saw Akka and I saw ZIO and I chose ZIO, and now I am biased. I've coded myself in the ZIO ecosystem, but back then I didn't know. I was a wee Scala babe, and I chose ZIO with no prior knowledge. So I don't know what that means, but yeah, I had both ecosystems available to me. But anyway, it's good to be here, and I'm mostly going to be asking questions. So we're going to start with some prepared questions, and then I see even more great questions coming in. Please don't be shy. Ask your questions. Challenge us in any way you feel like challenging us, or be nice, whatever you feel like. I'm excited to get to your questions. But first, to give you a chance to ask more of them and to type many, many paragraphs of thoughtful questions, let's just start with some nice primers. Let's just touch on some topics that I think maybe people would ask anyway if I didn't. So maybe in the interest of what, John, you said at the beginning, we could start out just by being reminiscent positively, if we are being reminiscent about Akka. What, for those who have had production experience with Akka, and clearly, I think, Ivan, you wrote your PhD in it, your dissertation in it. You wrote your PhD in it. Yeah, you wrote some software in it for your PhD. Like what was interesting and compelling to you at the time about Akka? And I'm sure at some point it sparked joy for you. So what are the best parts of, I guess, your experience with Akka? What does it do well? Maybe we could just start off with some positive thoughts, if you have them, and if not, feel free to abstain. And also for some of these questions, maybe some of them will apply more to us ZIVerge ZIO folks, and some more to people with like production Akka experience. So this one's, I guess, more targeted for those who have some real world Akka experience. So yeah, feel free. Maybe Ivan, just because I set you up there, we can start with you, but then anyone else who also just feel free to jump in afterwards.
That's fine. That's an easy question.
Okay, good.
I mean, I started with Scala at that time also. And Akka was for me, because I was building a distributed system, and with Akka, the Akka remote actors. I mean, this was basically, yeah, you just send a message to another node, and then it's, it's easy programming, distributed system for someone who didn't, had much experience. It was easy to set up, and it worked. So that was basically because I didn't want to mess with writing a protocol myself and then sending, stuff over the network. So that basically was it for me. And it was nice readable code, and it worked. So that was and they also had, the easy way to test distributed system, where I could spin up 3, 4, 5 nodes, and then, write basically unit tests with Akka remote. So this was, yeah, it solved my problem.
Yeah, a unique selling point to make it easy to do distributed systems, a non-trivial problem. And yeah, it kind of reminds me of a bit of like Erlang or something. It just comes with this framework out of the box and solves a really hard problem.
Yes, and Odersky was like raving about it. So this was also
yeah. He's a good
so if he says it's good, then it must be good. Yeah. So this was basically how I started with Akka.
Awesome. Anyone else have some positive memories, good thoughts?
I can yeah.
Yeah. Let's go, Jan, and then Michael. I saw you both go at the same time, so let's
sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So the first production experience, or the production exposure I had to Akka in a larger context must have been also around 2017, I think 18 maybe, where we were tasked with building a system for very large data volumes. So lots of simultaneous processing of large XML documents that came in and had to be routed to and from some other places, which definitely needed multiple nodes of answering a REST API. This some distributed data store underneath. And it was pretty clear that the cluster sharding aspect, where Akka allows you to handle everything that has to do with one document or one unit of data to one server automatically would really help out. But so that was sort of the technological reason, but there was also a team or a skills reason, where this was squarely a Java shop, where very few people had Scala experience, and I think even fewer had positive Scala exposure, back from the Scala 1.0 days where things were a little wild. And just doing something in Scala would not really have been practical. And I had a long thought on, okay, how do I spin this fight? And I decided to push Akka rather than Scala as a language. And there I must say, and actually that's a point I hope to get back to for ZIO. To my surprise a little bit, I think almost all of the Java developers that I've worked with have since moved to Scala, or at least sort of embraced a more functional, immutable, distributed programming approach as standard, because it kind of makes more sense, right? And if you write type-safe, immutable code as standard, Java gets in the way, and you're sort of looking for a language that allows you to express these things more naturally. So to me, Akka sort of as a side goal has been a good gateway to show people sort of a direction of growth within the Java ecosystem that they might not naturally stumble upon. I mean, if you look at recent Java developments like Micronaut, it's still very much mutable Java beans, in a big salad trying to talk to each other. And yeah, there's some reactive stuff mixed in, but it's not quite there yet. And yeah, I'm still looking out for, or hope to look out for all those Java folks, of which arguably there are a lot more than Scala folks still, and see how we can open some of the light towards them.
Absolutely. No, yeah, and I want to get back to what you're saying as well, and a little later on. I think you said Akka as a language. You had some ZIO related thoughts, so let's get back to that. That sounds interesting. But Michael, yes, what are your sort of positive memories?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's one of the things I wanted to share, and where I believe that even at the moment, Akka is kind of still has an edge against pretty much anything else I've seen so far. At the time I had, the domain I was approaching was basically a trading platform for securities, depth-based securities. So that's merging different aspects. And there's an active trading platform, so that's kind of a lot of availability is needed, consistency too. But to take a trading decision, you need a lot of data, because that's going to credit scoring and all other mechanisms. So it's kind of a fusion between something that requires data-intensive stuff and something that requires a good degree of availability. Many of the processes around trading are actually like state machines, where you truly need a single source of truth. And the clustering solution that Akka provides are kind of a very good fit for this type of distributed patterns, where yes, you don't care where things are deployed specifically. You can specify some actors to be like cluster singletons, where you have very strong consistency guarantees that you have only a single instance of that specific process running, and you can still have sharding on like it's a good mix and match of primitives for those kind of distributed processes that I had to deal a lot in that domain. Clearly, in the refactoring, we kept Akka for the specific things that were needed, but took a lot of the data pipelines out and everything else to a more functional approach that led up to way less resource usage on the servers. But that's my positive memory. I remember for doing actually the distributed aspects of Akka, it was quite pleasant.
Yeah, that clustering feature set seems to be something that has come up a lot. Yeah, and we'll definitely need to come up with a really strong solution for that. I'm sure there'll be some questions about alternatives a little later on. But that's great. So I might want to sort of connect then. Maybe we should look up at the title of this panel. And I can use that as the inspiration for the next sort of question. So we talked about some positive things, but if we did want to migrate, and perhaps let's just randomly out of a hat draw ZIO, because I think some of us have made those migrations. Clearly, Jan, it inspired your talk. And this was even before the sort of the monetary incentive existed. Maybe we could sort of fuse this together. What are sort of, I guess, the weaknesses of Akka that you found? What was difficult, and what might drive you to adopt ZIO in the first place? And what parts of Akka would you potentially replace with ZIO? So sort of a twin question of what gave you pain and what potentially, what aspects of that pain drove you to use ZIO, if you did use ZIO as a replacement for that? And maybe that could be open to just anyone who's had experience there. If anyone has any thoughts, just feel free to.
Like, I can try and retrace my steps if you like to. It's
yeah, for sure.
I think if I had to summarize it, it's probably along two main trains of thoughts. One of them fairly important, the other one almost coincidental, and I can't seem to convince anyone that it was a big thing, but it was to me. But I'll start with the bigger one, which is in Akka, we've heard about actors and remote actors, and actors are really good and they're really powerful. But in Akka, if you want to do anything concurrent-wise, it kind of has to be an actor. And you can make it an actor, you can write it as an actor, you can test it as an actor, and the test kit and everything else, but it has to be an actor. And actors are just a lot of code. It's not Java code, but there's so much stuff to write. Like, yeah, you need to do this, and then you can think about it, you can reason about it, because, you know, the concurrency and nicety. But sometimes just having you know, if you look at the ZIO concurrency primitives, like the queue and the ref and the ref and the other stuff that you can sort of build around. When I read through that and then saw it again, I thought, hey, wait a minute, these things we're doing, we are polling a REST service every 10 seconds and then comparing results and doing something else. And right now as an actor, it could probably look a lot simpler if we built this from other primitives. And that sort of realization came up and up again, that yeah, actors are great, but what if we had other building blocks and more different ones that we can use instead? And turned out that, at least for our example application, we actually don't have any actors anymore, but we're still using Akka for some other stuff, HTTP noteworthy, but the actor part has actually been replaced by just ZIO primitive. So that was kind of nice. And what I personally liked a lot was actually the dependency management part, and not so much the Z layers as they were in version 1, where, you know, yeah, there's a lot of on top of it that you sort of, that's still there, but now it's somewhere more under the rug. But the idea that ZIO is something like a program that you eventually run, but that actually can also represent the dependency management of that program that you also eventually run, and then in parallel where possible. That to me, you know, where I've had a decade or more of Spring stuff that I did, where, you know, if you're good old dependency injection that you try and make work through an XML file, all of that came sort of back and say, hey, that's kind of neat that it now sort of fits the same pattern. And I can't seem to convince anybody, both on the Java or on the Scala world, that that's a big thing. But it was to me. I really like the neatness of it, and that it sort of all fits in the same box.
Well, I'm convinced, Jan, unsurprisingly. Just in terms of, you just sort of mentioned this sort of idea of the actor as a hammer and making everything else a nail. Just sort of paraphrase you and reverse quote Adam from last Friday. We, I think, published the video already, but Adam kind of went into that topic as well, in case anyone's a little curious about actors and how they work, and maybe how you can replace an actor with something else. To briefly insert some experience of myself, sometimes I code in Swift, which actually has recently become the home to a lot of the developers of Akka. And they sort of, as part of a newer version of Swift, introduced actors as sort of a language primitive. It's a keyword actor. And getting the experience in Swift of experiencing an actor, it really did feel, especially knowing ZIO, like I wanted something like ZIO. I did not want an actor as sort of a more awkward, for me, atomic reference, an atomic reference that has all this boilerplate and seems like it's a bit just, yeah, kind of heavy duty for me. That was my experience running into actors in at least Swift, and I guess created in the Akka style. Anyway, any other people who have migrated to ZIO? Yeah, Jakub.
Yeah. I just wanted to point that it's quite funny that actors are considered like the worst part of Akka, like in the interaction sense, from the programmer's perspective. But on the other hand, actors were the thing that drawn a lot of developers to the Scala world back in the times. So that led to a lot of overused actor systems. I remember modeling business logic with actors. That was really bad idea, especially with classic actors, if some of you remember. So yeah, I think actors is the even though they solve very important problem, the interaction with actors from a programmer's perspective is the least pleasant experience in the Akka world.
I think part of that may have been the attempt to remodel Erlang's actor model in a type-safe shared heap language, where in Erlang it is actually not that verbose. It's really nice and separated to write an actor, and you have a lot more guarantees than you get on Scala. And they did the best that they could, but there's only so much you can gain there again.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I wanted to add, I agree 100% in general that the verbosity of actors and the kind of API that Akka exposes is probably the biggest pain point. But I would argue that they're actually not that bad as a primitive in itself, but it's kind of a very low level primitive. They are, if we think about the ZIO fiber, the new ZIO fiber, it's an actor system inside. There's a tell method, there's a poll method. So there's nothing wrong with the actor per se as a concurrency primitive or thing like that. But it's just that thinking about directly using actors to model your domain problems is messy. It ends up being a lot verbose.
Sure, yeah. Maybe if the problem is shaped like an actor, then you want an actor and that'll be perfect. But maybe not every problem needs to be solved directly with an actor. Cool. Well, thank you for those.
Maybe to end on a bit of a positive note, the actor thing. So the one thing that did fit an actor very well is the event sourcing model, right? Which I'm sure you've all encountered, which fits so very neatly onto the distributed sharding state of Akka as well. So that their actors do fit quite well.
Maybe just to thank you everyone so much. Just to sort of do a slightly different version or to switch gears slightly and a little more tactical question, which is, if you are migrating some code, there are kind of two styles, and I've definitely been asked this a lot in the ZIO Discord, which is whether it's coming from Akka or Play or something else. Do you recommend the incremental approach, picking some subsystem or starting from the top or the bottom and working your way down, or sort of stop the world and rewrite everything? Or any other approaches or any sort of tactics that have suited you well in your rewrite experiences? Maybe I don't know.
I can of course share what we do about it. Has a stop the world ever worked? I mean, your code has to be fairly small for that. Your microservice, you've done your homework. Your service is not more than 1,000 lines. Then yeah, we had to do it incrementally, and we're still doing incrementally. Where some mix of some implicits that turn ZIOs into futures at some HTTP route level, and then sort of slowly introducing more and more ZIO, rewriting some parse, rewriting and one actor in ZIO, adding some testing. Testing goes in parallel as well. You have the ZIO test over here, and then the Scala test over there. And I think I could do with a bit more hand holding, right? If we're making this a more how do you say, concrete strategy, there could be some, say, Akka HTTP to whatever ZIO integration or the other way around. But it's certainly not impossible. It wasn't well. It was a little hard to figure out, because you have to deal with the runtime and sort of some private unsafe and twiddle some magic fairy dust the right places, and then change the fairy dust around with ZIO2, which but it's doable to do it incremental, like any system should be, right? I mean, every day or week or whatever you release it, everything is incremental, and a framework change should not be viewed as something different, I believe.
Yeah, I agree, and I've had good experience in the past there. Oh, I heard an unmute too. Oh yeah, Ivan.
Yeah.
Wayne. Oops. Yes.
Yeah.
Ivan.
Yes. So we are doing incremental migration. It's still ongoing, and we first started with doing some bits here and there, but then at some point it gets a bit messy, and now we just packaged Akka into ZIO layers so that we have a clean runtime at the beginning that starts everything, and this also now allows to actually do the incremental, because then we can pull a thread or something that's now in Akka and then implement it in ZIO. And because now we have one runtime that can thread through, we have the dependency management, which I'm a big fan of, and it's little ball. I mean, a few lines of code, and you can package everything as a layer. It doesn't. You don't need to use ZIO. You can just use just the layer part of ZIO. So that's very nice and helpful.
That sounds cool. Yes, put all of Akka into a layer. Sounds nice, and I like it. Maybe I could bug you afterwards for like a demo slice of code or something. If you could share how that might.
It's open source.
Oh well, hey.
You can look at it.
Okay, yeah. I'll ask for a link then. That's perfect.
It's a little GitHub organization.
Jakub, I think you had something to say.
Yeah, just wanted to maybe advocate the other way around. I think there might exist systems that are so messy that will maybe not stop the world, but complete rewrite might be better than incremental fixing everything and redesigning everything. But yeah, I hope these are just extreme cases.
Well, yes, in the consulting, I guess, business, you see some things that should be rewritten immediately. Some dark code. Cool. So we have a huge slew of questions coming in. So I'm just going to ask a couple more quick ones, and then we're going to get to all your beautiful, thoughtful questions. So thank you so much, everyone. So first one, another sort of practical concern, maybe for more at the level of like a business at this point, which is kind of just in training and hiring. So Akka has been around for a while. It is a huge user base over the past decade. There are many books about it and whatnot. It's been out there. And so, yeah, people put it on their resumes, though I know increasingly people put ZIO on their resumes as well and other effect systems. But for those who have some experience sort of hiring people, what are some concerns, or are there difficulties currently out there for hiring for people, for instance, effect systems or ZIO versus Akka? Do you expect that to change, like from the business person's perspective? The people who hold us in thrall. Yes.
I guess I can say something about that. Sadly, we see this trend for a couple of years, where it's more and more difficult to find Akka developers for Akka projects. It seems like Akka stopped being sexy at some point, and there are other newer things that developer gravitate to. And yeah, for a company like Scala, where we try to support all ecosystems, it's a difficult situation to have a project incoming that needs Akka developers, and on the other hand, only available developers are saying that well, they don't want to work in Akka. And unfortunately, it happens more and more. I don't know if, well, I can speculate what's the reason, and I think the sexiness of Akka in quotes is the problem. But
I would ask,
yeah,
what do they want to work with instead of Akka?
ZIO or type level stack. ZIO is not a problem. Everyone wants to work in ZIO, to be honest. Yeah.
Cool. Any other folks hiring, looking at resumes, having experiences with trends?
No, but I maybe can share a little bit on the training side, because in the early migration, of course, we didn't really have ZIO developers. There was kind of a non-existing species at the moment. It was in development, not only ZIO, but also the concept of a ZIO developer. I would have to say that John at the beginning mentioned that it's an early project, documentation is still not there in a very good sense. But what I've seen is in Akka-like systems, yes, the documentation is a lot, but you really have to understand the whole documentation to make even minimal things. You need to understand how the whole system works. There's a lot of rough edges, a lot of good stuff. Their documentation is kind of amazing, but I like the fact that you can work with ZIO even without having a lot of documentation around. Yes, you get punched in the face the first few weeks. Yes, it's not the smoothest learning curve, but after 1 or 2 weeks, you've learned the combinators that are around a little bit, you know the patterns a little bit, and from there it's you're ready to go. You can progressively learn step by step, even without checking any type of documentation. That's at least my experience from having trained somebody moving forward on the technologies.
Yeah, not that we don't aspire to have better documentation. However, yeah, I mean, going back to my past experience, I think one of the things that did intimidate me about Akka was just a lot of verbiage, sort of heavy words like behaviors and oh goodness, what other kind of words? Well, sources and flows and all these things. Obviously, ZIO has its fair of names as well. But I don't know. Going back in time, it was a lot easier for me to just sort of copy some code examples and get the sense of things, rather than with Akka. It did feel like I had to, set up my actor system and have materializers and scope and behaviors, and it just felt like I was, dealing with something, trying to land an aircraft, trying to land an aircraft carrier, which doesn't even make sense, but that's what it felt like to me. Okay, so one last question before we're going to go through the many user questions, and maybe this I can start this out with you, Ivan, as I know you're currently in the process of migrating to ZIO, but what have sort of been the benefits that you've noticed from doing that? I mean, obviously there are now these, we sort of touched on some maybe pains of Akka that inspired you to catalyze this process, but what have you seen in practice after migrating? Like, have people had a good time using it? Have things gotten easier to understand or not? Yeah, what's sort of been maybe the benefits and or drawbacks of the migration?
I mean, the code is much cleaner, but I don't know if it's just now more experience and have write better code, or if it's really ZIO that makes clear code. But where ZIO really helps is because, okay, I have to confess, we use exceptions with Akka. Yeah. So and I mean, yeah, obviously with ZIO, you don't use exceptions. So we use a lot of attempt because we have a library that we call that throws exceptions. Then, so the code is much more behaved afterwards. I mean, I know what it does. If it compiles, it usually works. So this is, and with Akka is, yeah. I mean, also second compassion, we use Akka classic. So we never moved to the typed Akka, and the third confession, we used the ask anti-pattern. I mean, it wasn't an anti-pattern. It wasn't an anti-pattern at that time when we started with it. And timeout hell and all those things. But it actually helps now to migrate, because we have four comprehensions that do a lot of ask stuff, and it's relatively easy. Instead to call an actor, you call a ZIO, and so it's. But it's, the code is, because we have a lot of sequential stuff that needs to happen, and you don't need to think if it's something else doing it concurrently. It's readable code, and yes, that you have the error channel, and that you can actually say, okay, or not use it and just die stuff. So it's readable code for us.
So you say, yeah, it might be difficult to tease apart whether or not ZIO made your code better, or you just became better in that time, because it's both moving forward in terms of experience, which is both funny, but still true. Everyone here watching has become more experienced. So just rewrite your code and it'll be better, probably.
Yes,
but also, yes.
But I think what's really is that ZIO allows you, or doesn't allow you, to write bad code, or it allows you less to write bad code than Akka did, let's say, like that.
ZIO makes it harder to write bad code, because it tries to make it really easy to make best practices easy.
Yes. So that's the.
Yeah, we've got to introduce some anti-patterns. We've got to come up with some new anti-patterns. That's funny. No one ever markets them as anti-patterns. We should do that. But I think something that maybe you mentioned at the very beginning, John, was sort of the maturity of Akka, but maybe sort of in a similar sense of not knowing if you got better as a programmer or ZIO is helping you. To some degree, ZIO has an advantage by coming out later, by being a newer project. One of the sort of the double-edged sword of this is that, patterns evolve, understandings evolve, sort of communal best practices evolve, and ZIO, being a new project, was able to really embrace that, and I think went super far in embracing and exploring new best practices and trying to find new interesting ways of solving problems. Whereas Akka, being an older project, has things slow down over time. They need to keep their old user bases happy. They can't upset. They can't do all the breaking changes that maybe we were able to do for ZIO too, even though we tried to keep it at a minimum. But there's just some, over time, one day there will be another framework, in 40 years from now, that'll come along, and it won't have the baggage ZIO has, and be able to sort of chart new territory. But great. I think, just due to the number of questions, thank you so much for answering all those. Let's get to the user questions, or the audience questions, or the non-user questions, or the avowed non-user questions. I'm not sure. But let's just get into it, because we have a lot, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to all of them, just due to how many there are. But let's get started. And I think maybe I could fuse a few together, because there's one that I've seen in bits and pieces, and maybe I'll just read a couple that seem related. Yes. So Lightbend is, let me just read this verbatim. A couple of them. Lightbend is taking a risk with this move, but this is also not a risk to the broad adoption of Scala at the same time. Oh, is this also not a risk to the broad adoption of Scala at the same time? Spark and Akka have contributed a lot to the popularity of the language. This raises the need for FP communities in the Scala world to come together and collaborate to narrow the capability gap that may exist today between Akka and the stacks in the FP communities. And these sometimes complex, stateful distributed systems like the Akka toolkit that has enabled many companies over the last decade. So, oops, maybe I actually didn't see a question mark in that question. I should have read that all the way first. But I think we can sort of extract from this that there is a danger, perhaps, that Lightbend leaving might bring people away from Scala. I think that's reasonable. I'd love people to sort of touch on that, but maybe simultaneously, I think there's another concern that I've seen at least a couple questions, which is like, what's to stop ZIO from going the same way? And I've seen that on Reddit, there's some concerns. Maybe we could start with actually just that one. So yes, if you have any thoughts about how ZIO, what's going to stop ZIO from going the same way in the future, or if you have thoughts not on that, but on is this a danger for sort of Scala at large? So sort of two maybe slightly related questions. I thought they were more related, but then I read them. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because first off, Lightbend has every right to do what they did. And also, like, if you're not paying, you can't demand free labor. That's the reality of open source, is you don't get to dictate the terms by which someone else donates their time and money and energy into maintaining your part of your code as open source. So you know, good on Lightbend, but at the same time, when a company makes a move like this, they do destabilize things, because it's legitimately seen as a violation of trust. Because a lot of contributors contributed on the expectation this would be Apache 2 licensed forever. And a lot of companies invested in this technology because they thought it would be Apache 2 licensed forever. And it's not right now. And so a lot of people, I think, are struggling. And a very natural, obvious question for them is, how do we know ZiVerge isn't going to do the same thing, right? 2 years from now, or 6 months from now, or 10 years from now? And the answer is, well, obviously, I've been very vocal, I think, about saying, ZIO is going to be Apache 2 licensed forever. Nothing will change that. But then you have to worry about, okay, well, what happens if I get run over by a truck, or like someone buys ZiVerge at some point, or IPOs, or whatever change in management? You still have to worry about that. So what I want to do, and I think all of the co-founders of ZiVerge are 100% on board with me. So Adam Fraser and Sandra Wolf and so forth, we're all on board with this. We are going to change some detail. Basically, what we're trying to do is create a nonprofit called ZIO Foundation, who will own all of the IP and the trademark and everything else associated with that. And basically, it will be contractually obligated for this, B Corp, benefit corp, as they call them, nonprofit, to maintain all these assets under the Apache 2 license forever and ever. And basically, no one, including ourselves, okay, including ZiVerge. ZiVerge is not going to be able to go and take ZIO and make it BSL. We're not going to be able to do that. Legally, it's not going to be possible. So I think that is the best way for us to guarantee that ZIO was born open source and will always be open source. And I think it will help gain back some of the trust that has been lost by Lightbend taking this move, which I totally support them taking, absolutely. And I think it's going to help people decide that, yeah, it's okay to continue investing in projects. Like, it makes it harder, because there's always some projects out there that are going to do it. Elasticsearch did it, Tangent did it, other companies have done this. And every time they do something like this, it makes the rest of us who really believe in open source and don't, like, philosophically, we're aligned with open source, we don't want to change that stuff, it makes it harder for us. We've got to compensate more. Some companies will solve this problem by donating to the ASF, which is great. That's a hard, complex, lengthy process that is not guaranteed to succeed. So we're not going to take that path personally, but we've all got to work together and think, what can we do to regain the trust that is lost whenever a company takes steps like this? And for us, it's creating the ZIO Foundation and setting it up so that we can't, even if we want, take ZIO and take it BSL at some point.
But still, on top of that, it's not sort of standard practice for companies to do this yet. I mean, even Elasticsearch, there was a very specific reason they did that, and they were, I think, a little bit more open maybe than we've seen from Lightbend yet. And I'd have to guess. Again, I don't know Lightbend internally, but I'd have to guess something is related to the business model that they have as a business, probably being a little bigger, maybe having more resources into actual development rather than in consulting, and I don't know, needing to keep that running somehow. So again, not up to me to ask ZiVerge to do something similar, but I don't know, the figures of, how you pay for your things will probably affect the likelihood of the distribution of how much effort do we put in, paying Adam to actually work on ZIO versus sending him out and making lots of money for us at a customer. So those kind of things may drive into the decision of how to deal with the software that you end up making. Do you understand what I'm getting at? It's like as a company, do you sell the knowledge that you have on building distributed systems, or is that your selling point, like the employees you have, or is it that we're really very good at making a framework?
Yeah, no, and it's exciting to chart some new legal territory, because obviously I think everyone here now really just wants to work on open source and maybe build cool projects with that open source. But yeah, it's this magical thing that motivates me. I like people seeing my code and being able to contribute and pairing with everybody, and it's super fun. But obviously the concerns are just that a company isn't a person. It's a sort of maybe semi-sociopathic entity by design to not have emotions, to maximize money for stakeholders. And so we have to build our own sociopathic entity that will combat it and maybe be legally bound to, we just have to sort of, It's kind of like designing, it reminds me of like friendly AI problems. Like we've got to design a company that cannot, even if it really feels like it, when it gets VC money, like take ZIO away from us. And so we're all working towards that problem. But yeah, I get the skepticism, but I hope
the core of it maybe boils back to what I heard. I think someone from Red Hat said at some point about the reason for the existence of open source, which is companies realizing that there's no point privatizing what does not make you unique, right? We don't need to be all building this particular piece of an operating system that we build it on. Why don't we work together on the part that we all need anyway, and then we could sort of specialize in the things that make us special. Which to me always stuck, but it's hard to make that concrete into fairly low level territory, like the kind of framework and new idea approach that ZIO has taken and Akka has been doing, which there are a lot of unique decisions there.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. I mean, maybe there will be some more questions on that, and I'll read it again. But as I'm working through, let's just keep going down the list. So a quick one, maybe we can answer this quickly, which is my technical architects keep yelling, but ZIO doesn't have back pressure, which was a prominent feature of Akka streams. How do I convince them that C-Stream does actually have back pressure? Can we convince them in a couple of words?
Yeah, that is a really easy one, because ZIO streams are pull-based. So back pressure is inherently built in. Back pressure is really something you need when you have a push-based architecture. You're pushing too much that you can't handle. But when you're pulling when you need it, then you already get back pressure out of the box. And the other thing there in the entire ZIO architecture is ZIO's built on fibers. And anytime you have a fiber that's doing some kind of work, you can wait for the result of that fiber without actually blocking any threads. And so that also gives you a way of suspending until there's more results available without wasting any system resources. So it's built into both ZIO streams as well as the underlying ZIO architecture itself.
You architected a beautiful solution to that question, Adam. Thank you.
But I would actually add a small comma in here.
Please.
Usually the push side of a stream ends up being some sort of queue, and queues have a back pressure strategy. So in a queue, you can, if you have a push system, you can easily say, okay, I have only a bounded queue or an unbounded queue or a sliding buffer, or you can even build your own custom back pressure strategy if you want to. So there is back pressure at the end. Yeah,
exactly. And ZIO has a very high performance queue implementation. It has every variety of queue. So you can do exactly the same things you can do with Akka with ZIO.
Yeah,
perfect.
I think ZIO's really taken back pressure very serious, even like so seriously that we got a lot of sort of flack for how pervasively back pressured things are. For example, every time you go to interrupt a fiber, that doesn't return until the fiber is actually completely shut down. All its resources are released, and also all the descendants of that fiber are shut down. So we back pressure everything, even things people tell us not to back pressure. We still back pressure. We back pressure so much that we had to invent an operator called disconnect to stop back pressuring, because occasionally it's a good thing to not back pressure.
Okay, so now your technical architects will yell that ZIO back pressure is too much, I'm sure. And maybe we can cut that segment into a little bite-sized response that you can hand to them to invert your problem. Perfect. So well, we're just going to keep going because there are many good questions. So what are some of the reasons to stick with Akka instead of switching to ZIO? Besides, I guess, having lots of money to burn, are there parts of Akka where ZIO is not ready to take over? I think that's a totally fair question. And yeah, I open it up, and I'm also going to disappear just for 20 seconds for more LaCroix. But I'm listening.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to take a start on that. So Akka's been around for 15 years. So obviously there's things that Akka has done in that period of time. And I think you can do anything that you're doing with Akka today with ZIO, but there may be a little bit more work to do of Akka maybe just, well, here's this thing and you just do exactly this thing, versus with ZIO today, you have to take 3 different things and put them together to do that. And so I think the real decision for you a lot of times is, is it worth it for you to do that work? We talked about these license fees that could be in the tens of millions of dollars. Is it worth it for you to kind of put these different components together? And I think a couple of areas there that Akka is definitely good is things like Alpaca that just got integrations with a lot of things. ZIO also has integrations with a lot of things, but there's definitely more that we can do there. And then I think particularly on distributed computing, there are several ZIO solutions being developed, ZIO Flow, ZIO Entity. You can put together a very strong ZIO-based solution right now with a combination of ZIO Redis, ZIO Kafka, and a library called Shardcake that came out by the developer of Caliban. But you got to put those things together versus Akka just gives you something, the one thing that does that today. And so you've got to decide if that's worth the license fees.
Anyone, any other thoughts? Things that you would still use?
I mentioned it in, I think, in introduction. I don't think it should be underestimated the Java support that Akka gives. It like there's a whole world of developers currently using Spring and Java that have rolled into Akka, and I think it's safe to say that they're not the ones to jump onto ZIO right now. And I think that is such a big topic that it might be, but you know, unless there's a hard no somewhere, that probably discussion on its own, like how far do you want to open up there, or what should be the strategy towards, you know, those kind of well, that kind of bridge of either people or systems that are currently that are written in Java.
Ooh, are you suggesting a ZIO 4J? Sort of.
Well, the thing is, in my mind, I've been mapping ZIO concepts to the closest thing on Java, and it's pretty far away and not that far away simultaneously. The thing that Java is missing most is I always get them mixed up. Intersection types, like the thing that all the Z layers need to do their work to actually calculate what do we have in dependencies, because there really is nothing on the Java side to represent that. But then again, you can't do much worse than the completely typeless dependency injection that you get from Spring. So deleting that part, you know, I don't know. I'd have to write a couple of mock-up things to see how far you can push things. But again, if there is a intent to work in that direction, I mean, stuff can be done. You could push in. You know, I'm not sure if Kotlin has intersection types, but maybe you could look in that direction. I don't know how compatible they'd be to express those between Kotlin, Java, and Scala. I mean, I think there's a broader horizon than only Scala that at least should be explicitly made a part of a strategy where you say, well, yes, no, here, maybe, rather than doing only the Scala 3 or 2 as a direction, because I think it also makes, you know, it brings the right people on board to help think in that direction.
That could be. Oh, Ivan.
Does anybody know what the ratio is in Java and Scala? that use Akka?
It's a good question. I have no idea. And we could look that up.
I'm sorry, I
Because
didn't
we
hear
are
the
talking.
question.
Oh, I was wondering, I believe the ratio of the sort of the Java Akka versus Scala Akka users.
Oh, geez. I heard someone from Langton say that at some point, but I don't dare say. I'm not sure there's a clear winner there, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't think either of them is in the clear advantage, if I dare say, but I might be wrong.
Okay, cool. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they offered for both. Cool. Maybe another one to sort of follow up on a few threads of questions, because one is here is when is Z language coming out, which is a language I'm entirely doing ZIO flat maps, or more, I guess more seriously, when is ZIO Flow coming out? And I guess just generally, I mean, for the ZiVerge people or anyone else involved in ZIO open source or interested in coming up with a ZIO flavored solution in this space, like where are we focusing our attention to sort of deal with this, you know, both opportunity and challenge? Like personally, I love ZIO. It's like the way of code that I've been searching for a long time. And so I got so excited about it. And I want it to succeed. And here's like, personally, like, oh man, there's this huge opportunity to show ZIO off to a whole bunch of more people, but we need to make sure that, you know, we can legitimately solve their problems, because we can't just pretend. We're not going to pretend, because they'll quickly figure out that we're, I guess, pretending, and then they will never trust ZIO again. So what are we doing to legitimately, you know, step up to the plate here? And yeah, any question, any responses?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start. So I think there are three areas that we're focusing on right now coming out of this news about Akka. So one of them is ZIO HTTP. That type of functionality is, I think we talked about a little bit less because it's a little bit maybe less exciting than distributed computing, but the reality is it's something you deal with every day. We need to stand up web services, we need to have servers, we need to have clients, we need to be able to interact, they need to be high performance, they need to be expressive. And the Dream 11 team, who was the original developers of that library, did an incredible job, but they actually made a decision to contribute that to the ZIO organization. So the entire team of ZIO contributors has been very actively contributing to that library and building that out and getting that to a point where it's really going to be state of the art. And I think it's going to be really exciting for everyone here, both in terms of performance as well as just how easy and joyful it can make for you to write those types of applications, just like everything else with ZIO. So that's one thing we've been very, very busily working on, getting that ready to go to the next level, and that's going to be coming out soon. I think the second thing there is very high performance streaming. That's another bread and butter type thing that is one of the basic reasons that I think people have been using Akka, and delivering that at that level of performance where you just go from one to the other is a core priority for ZIO. And then I think the third thing is having a more full-featured distributed programming solution. And there are several solutions in the space. ZIO Flow is one that's under very active development that I think when that is done, and when that's something we have, is really going to allow you to write a lot of these types of programs without thinking about these problems of distributed computation, and really give you that promise of being able to declaratively describe, here's what I want to do, and just have it done the right way across a distributed system. But I think there are also several other things we're going to be working on in the more immediate term. There's ZIO Entity, as well as there's a library called Shardcake that I mentioned before that I think is one we're going to be putting more of our effort into, as well as putting that together so there's more of a off-the-shelf solution where you know exactly how to take these components together and build a solution for a typical problem in distributed programming.
And to quickly just amend that, like, or not amend, but to add on to it, it's like all of these aren't all projects that we came up with 2 weeks ago when we heard the news, right? These were already all in progress projects. It just sort of maybe put a fire under our butts. These are already things that were sort of on the roadmap for us to all focus on this year. And
100%.
And all things that were already in progress, including the ZIO HTTP transfer. It was just a good excuse to like, oh, let's all let's all work
Yes.
together at the company really hard on making ZIO HTTP as shiny as possible. So just good motivation, but not like, yeah, we rethought our general direction. This is all stuff we've been caring about.
Exactly.
Cool. All right.
Can,
great. Oh, please jump in. Yes.
I would
Great.
maybe add, yeah, the situation is very new, and like the move that Lightband made changes a lot, and I think the clustering and the event sourcing are the biggest headaches right now for architects that are considering migrating to anything else. So I think the attention of the community should be ZIO entity and Shardcake. I did spend the last week looking into these libraries I didn't even know existed. Yeah, and I hope to spend my personal time and maybe push Scala towards contributing to these two projects.
Yeah, I would say right now, like, we are so close, tantalizingly close to having something in that space, because we're coming at it from a couple of different independent angles. Some of these projects have been in development for a year or two, and they're only now just sort of becoming released and being put through production cycles and whatnot. So we're almost there. And also, like, there's synergy combining, for example, the excellent Shardcake with ZIO gRPC and ZIO Kafka. You could assemble something that will give you a lot of the functionality of Akka cluster. We're not 100% there yet, but we can see the end. It's coming. We need additional investment. And we weren't particularly, tremendously motivated to do that, right? Because a lot of us were using Akka. We even have, thanks to Pierre, we have an excellent wraparound Akka cluster that lets you leverage that ZIO entity is powered by Akka cluster. So we've been using Akka stuff, and the Scala C folks have these wrappers that allow you to use Akka HTTP in ZIO apps. We've been sort of using all that stuff. And now, obviously, we've got to work faster, right? We don't have a choice now. We have to come out with solutions that are hopefully best in class and also 100% open source and Apache 2 licensed, and give the ZIO spin on things. What are the ZIO spin? I think being sort of built on mathematical principles, not in your face, but behind the scenes, strong types, embrace of everything that Scala has, composability, things should fit together nice and neatly, modularity, which is a really amazing thing, Shardcake. So Shardcake takes the approach that maybe Akka tried to do too much. Maybe you should have sort of entity sharding separate from state. Maybe those things should be pulled apart, and that actually opens up Shardcake to whole new ways of building applications than you saw with distributed actors. So I think we're in a good position. Are we there yet? No. But we know where we need to go. And we are, like Scala C and ZIVerge, we're all investing way more resources now since the Lightband announcement. And a lot of the upcoming hackathons that we're organizing are all going to be geared towards closing that gap and making sure people have amazing 100% open source solutions to these very important critical problem areas.
Great. Yeah. There are lots of questions, just sort of looking through the list about sort of specific, libraries to replace specific Akka libraries. And I think we've probably touched on a few of those just in the course of the conversation. But definitely re-up any particular questions in case I happen to have aggregated it for you. And there's something you really want to know how to replace in particular, or a recommendation. At least. Okay, so let's keep going. Yeah, I'd like to ask a question that could sort of open it up to sort of just everyone and not just this. So okay, here's another sort of one maybe that we haven't touched on, which is I'm interested in how to replace Akka actors, Akka clustering not needed. I've seen it even used ZIO's gloss on atomic reference, so our ref type, but it's not quite the same. I'd also like to know how to replace Akka's TCP library, Akka.io, since one of our projects uses that. Any thoughts on that particular replacement? Maybe we haven't touched on that one. And if we have, we can just get through that quickly.
Yeah, so I can definitely take the first part. I think if you were coming from an actor and all you were looking for in ZIO was its ref data type, which is basically atomic reference, I think you're definitely right. That's not enough for you. But luckily, ZIO has a lot of other things in addition to that. And so if you really want an actor, what an actor is in ZIO is basically a fiber that takes from a queue. And you can offer things to the queue, and the fiber will take them and work with them, and you can have your actor in ZIO. And in fact, there is a ZIO actors library that provides that functionality. But what I think you will probably find as you start to use ZIO and you see that you've got this broader set of tools is you may not actually need an actor. That ZIO actors library, I would say, is not one of the most widely used libraries in the ZIO ecosystem because people find that once they don't have to, actors actually aren't what you need for most problems. I think for some problems, they're very good if you just want to encapsulate state and be able to work with that state in a mutable way internally. But there are lots and lots of other problems, and ZIO gives you lots of tools to deal with them.
I can 100% second that. Actually, the reason that we actually took the plunge and tried ZIO was the existence of ZIO actors, which we then ended up totally not using. So, yeah.
Great.
I think with regards to the TCP part, I don't think there's a ready solution for use, but if I were to look into this problem, I would probably look at ZIO HTTP.
Yeah, but does that use underneath, does it use NetT or does it have its own little?
Yeah, exactly. And well, to me, NetT is the same level of abstraction as Akka. So possibly, maybe we could have a layer of integration ZIO NetT, and that could be a solution to this problem.
Great. I'm going to ask this question, which sort of reiterates an earlier one, but just I think it's the one that I've seen the most, so I want to read it. And this one's particularly well phrased and strong. So let me ask this. So considering ZIO is effectively backed by ZiVerge, does ZiVerge have the similar economic pressures that Lightbend has? To me, the Akka license migration has made me skeptical of vendor-owned OSS projects. And as a follow-up, is ZIO going to enforce any legal clauses enforcements up front so that ZIO customers, users can have higher trust that the ZIO license won't change in the future? So yeah, maybe that's for you, John.
I think hopefully I mostly answered that, but I think there's a good question, which is like different dynamics. Why did Lightbend do that versus ZiVerge? And I think that there's a difference in how these, like ZiVerge is a consulting company right now. All we do is help people implement. Lightbend did not want to go down that path. They had no option to go down that path because they raised VC money very early on. And when you raise VC money, the clock is ticking. You have to make money. In fact, you have to make a ton of money, and it has to be product money. It can't be solution. So even though Lightbend had an opportunity to make a large amount of consulting revenue, it could never make them a multi-billion-dollar company. That was not going to happen. And it wouldn't provide the sorts of returns that a VC is interested in. You have to be a product-based company. So the moment they raised money, it started the clock ticking. They had to become a product company, which means they had to try to build products. And they did. They tried to build a lot of products. Ultimately, they were not successful or have not been successful yet. Maybe they will be with Calyx, but they have not been successful trying to build them. We don't have those same pressures. ZiVerge is a small company, 40 people. We're going along, building open source. We're having a great time helping implement ZIO. We do believe that we will come up with a product, but that product has to be sort of pulled from us. And also, I think that we're in no hurry to get ourselves in the same situation that they were. And my personal role models are companies like Databricks and Confluent. And they did not change the license, their Apache 2 licensed software project. They didn't try to change Spark to be BSL. They didn't try to change Kafka to be BSL. They built solutions that made it easier to use those at scale in the enterprise. And I think that's fantastic. If ZiVerge builds a product, and I hope that we do, then it's going to be much more like a Databricks or a Confluent than a Lightbend. I have no desire whatsoever to go down the Lightbend path, and won't take VC money to do that because I don't think it makes sense.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'll keep. We have so many questions, so let's keep going. So this is a fun one. But why not? We're not the only effect system around. There are other alternatives. Why not Cat's effect? Why not Monix? Anyone? I'll just duck. Any thoughts?
So I'll go first, and then maybe other people can. I think there's one set of answers I could give you around technology, and just if you are going to use one of these systems, you want to use the leader in the space, and ZIO is the one that's been first to develop so many features as we go through these effect systems. But I think actually, if you're coming from Akka, that's in a way not the relevant issue for you. The relevant issue for you is just your team's probably not going to be productive or nearly as productive using that stack of you're coming from Akka, you're coming from what's closer to a Java world, to some of the discussions earlier. And there's just much more of a learning curve there. I think even the type level folks have been moving to say, well, you should work with a concrete IO type instead of doing the tagless final and doing the category theory. But then as soon as you want to work with HTTP4S, or as soon as you want to work with any of the other libraries, you're immediately kind of thrust back into that. So at least my advice and my experience, even for people who aren't coming from Akka, who sometimes are coming from the type level stack and are finding that they're not able to be productive with large organizations and with onboarding developers and training people, is you're going to spend your time figuring out how to do category theory and Scala, basically, instead of spending your time doing the migration from Akka to an alternative, which is really what you need to do and you kind of need to have done yesterday, because the rest of your colleagues probably don't even care about this Akka thing. They want 10 new features next year that were on your roadmap before this even got announced. So obviously I'm definitely biased here, but that would be my very strong advice.
I loved Adam's response. Basically, innovation and teachability, and I think ZIO is really a strong leader in both of those categories. I think another consideration is what libraries can you use, right? If you're going to choose an ecosystem, you want access to a lot of libraries. Well, if you choose the ZIO ecosystem, thanks to the ZIO developed CATS interop package, you can consume 100% of all the type level libraries from ZIO apps. And there's no conversion, you can just natively use them. And plus, you can consume 100% of all the ZIO native libraries, which is large and significant. And there are no alternative. There's no equivalents to things like Shardcake or Caliban, no production equivalents to those libraries in the type level ecosystem. So if you want to choose all the libraries out there, you want to choose the type level ones and the ZIO ones and mix and match and just sort of put your own stack together, then I think it makes a ton of sense to choose ZIO.
To me, and a small aspect of it is indeed the learnability. I was at a Scala meetup a while back where some CATS folk were showing, I already forgot what it was, something that could dynamically take a case class and do some fancy mapping of the field names to something else inside a JSON structure and then turn it into plurals, and something involving a combination of reflection, generics, macros, and implicits, which are sort of the dimensions of the Scala language that combine the least nice. And having, I personally, I've been around these parts for a while, and I can think along one of these dimensions. But if I have to combine, trying to explain how this macro interacts with the implicits that are being looked up, and then under the hood does some other type mangling, I lose it. Even though the code might do something really fancy, I don't get it anymore. And I do like in ZIO that macros are used very lightly. Implicits they're used at all. They're also very light. Unfortunately, I do see some projects sort of moving onto the mountain of, let's do this cool stuff of automatically JSON mapping this case class, which seems to be a default example in Scala, which I never want because I want to be very explicit what my JSON and my XML looks like. But in general, ZIO manages to take sort of the least amount of technical baggage to solve a problem, and I do like that.
Yeah, I'm probably biased, but I mean, people watch Symposium ever, our little Friday things, if I could pitch that, which is what this one sort of is, except not just me and Adam coding. If you see me type, I like to do things very quickly. I like Vim and Dvorak and all these sorts of silly things. I like to get my ideas down as quickly as possible. Maybe it's just its own fun thing beyond programming. I kind of learned it all simultaneously, and I find it just as enjoyable to just feel like I'm in charge of the the computer machine. And so maybe not everyone feels, and it seems like not everyone, by looking at other libraries, agrees with my tastes, but I like minimizing imports. I like minimizing the number of concerns and names that I have to think about at once. You know, making things no simpler than necessary, but making the happy path really, really simple. One thing that we worked a lot on in ZIO2 is like we made all these spreadsheets and whatnot for just sort of making names consistent, or making sure that for most things you do, all you have to do is import ZIO._, and not have to import a whole bunch of nested packages, just because that's, especially as a teacher and someone writing a lot of ZIO examples from scratch, I don't like to import a whole bunch of nested packages. And I think newcomers as well don't like that experience. I also think sort of our culture of teaching here has given us a really unique opportunity where, you know, Adam, John, myself, and others involved in ZIO teach it to a lot of new people. And we both get sort of to use it a lot and to sort of really feel the pains of the beginner's experience a lot, and hopefully learn from those pains. But yeah, and we like to be really open to criticism as well, and try to develop a thick skin around it. So obviously people have different opinions, and please do share them. Okay, that was, I'm not sure if anyone, any other non-Zyvergians besides Jan want to wade into the eternal conflict, but if not, I'll continue moving moving right along. So yeah, any chance to see, this is a really one for everyone, can be can think out loud on this one, which is any chance to see an open source fork of Akka the way we see OpenSearch forked from Elasticsearch? I think that's on some people's minds. I think I saw some posts earlier regarding that. Any thoughts on whether that's going to happen?
I don't think we really know yet, but there's some very significant legal issues around that. And I don't want to say I have a crystal ball, but my observation from the organizations that I've worked with is that they're usually relatively risk averse. The last thing you want to do if you're an engineering organization is incur a giant lawsuit for your company. And at least in organizations I've worked with, I've seen them stay away from things that I would say are much safer than this. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest in having real alternatives to Akka versus kind of building that liability for yourself, because it's not just a decision you're making now, but it's, well, if you do that for the next 3 years, then at some level you have a contingent liability of 3 years from now, someone could come back, or 7 years from now, someone could come back and say, you owe us now, maybe it's not 50 million, it's $45 million plus treble damages, plus all sorts of other craziness. And I think that's going to be scary for a lot of people, and that easily pays for a lot of either time or consulting fees to help make that risk go away. But time will tell.
Great. So, okay, I just read this one, and I'll go. Any plan for a play-like framework based on ZIO? And maybe I'll answer that myself a little bit, which is that obviously we are working on ZIO HTTP and want to make that a little higher level than maybe just any old framework. But I definitely have a personal interest in you know, pursuing, you know, my white whale is a Rails-esque equivalent in ZIO, but I'm not sure how long that'll take. But I don't know. I'm interested in that. Are there any other sort of thoughts on that from anyone else? Whether or not we might see something bigger, frameworky based on ZIO. I think we're just trying to work up the stack. Like we just got ZIO2 out, and we're super proud of ZIO2. And now we were already, as we mentioned, planning on getting to ZIO HTTP. Now the stakes have been raised, so we're getting to that faster and with more fury than we would have otherwise. But
I've kind of still been waiting for the Scala.js ZIO equivalent of Laminar, like a sort of reactive UI thing that runs in the web browser, but nobody's picked it up yet for some reason.
Which did you say Sail? Which one's this?
Laminar is the Scala.js framework where you have a sort of a stream-like data type that you know, you transform your data into UI elements in a sort of neat way, but not ZIO. Now ZIO does compile to Scala.js, I believe. So I don't know. It would be a sort of a 2+2 thingy to actually do that.
You are talking to the right person for it. In Kit Langton.
Well, I love
Like,
Laminar.
I think I saw you demonstrate Laminar at some point, didn't you?
Yeah, I love Laminar. I don't know if I want to. We have so much to do in the back end. I'm happy. Just.
I know it's a big thing. Plus, ZIO is probably a little heavy to. I don't know how much would be left of it if you let the Scala.js compiler loose on that.
Yeah. But no, interesting. What do you think about it?
I'll let other people speak about the front end side of that, but personally, I'm very motivated to see something bigger than just a library come out of the ZIO ecosystem. I think that something that holistically combines all of the concerns that a typical developer has when they're starting to build a new web app makes a ton of sense. I think that you should be able to achieve higher productivity than a Spring without sort of the edge cases and warts and reflection and stringly based typing that you get out of a framework like that. I think we can bring strong authorization, authentication, obviously distributed tracing and logging and persistence, and really principled performant persistence and caching and all of that stuff together in a framework that you slap HTTP or whatever you want on the front end, and it gives you that full stack solution to building web, mobile backends, and microservices. And then there's what is play beyond that? Well, it's the front end component, and that's what we need to figure out. And that's not a question for me. I'm more interested in the back end side of things, but like Jan and I think Kid and others have expressed interest and desire for Scala to play well on the front end and to have really compelling solutions. So whether that ends up being server side stuff or client side stuff or who knows what else, I can't say.
The desire is certainly there, but yeah, we have I think our work cut out with just all the projects that we've talked about at that one level up. Yeah. Great. So, okay, another maybe straightforward one. So it makes sense to start new projects using ZIO instead of Akka. Oh, I agree. However, for legacy code that has been developed over years, how do you decide if it's going to be cheaper to redevelop things versus pay for the license? I guess that's very, very subjective, but are there any hints from anyone around that? They would like
make the calculation like always, like create an estimate for yourself. But I would say also simultaneously try and spend at least a week or so playing with the new technology. Like do something with ZIO, just separately try and get a feeling for, does this fit the way I like to think? Since your estimates will be based on your understanding of that. And then it's just like anything else where you do want to do a big technological change together with ongoing development. You try and find the use cases, the new business development that you need to do anyway, and think, maybe this is a good one to do a little bit more. But then we introduce some ZIO as well, or make a new microservice or whatever fits you.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would just say with my ZIverge hat on is those license fees will pay for a lot of consulting. So I have a feeling that one way or another, you're probably better off putting the elbow grease into it, whether it's your own team or whether you get external help. And I think to some of the other conversations earlier about refactoring, that maybe is also an opportunity to think about what else you could do better. But I think that's probably the way you want to go.
So just because it's been an hour and a little bit, and almost 2 hours actually, we should probably wrap up nice and clean while we still have energy and can still speak full coherent sentences. Speaking for myself mostly. I've had too much LaCroix today. So are there maybe just some like final thoughts from anyone? I know maybe some of those questions from the audience were more ZIverge focused or more about particular libraries, but any thoughts from Jan, Michael, Ivan, Jakub, just about anything related to the topic that you'd like to end on, or stuff that you're thinking about going forward?
Yeah, maybe I can start. Going back to the last question. I think it's kind of summing up our discussion. So in my opinion, if you decided to do a migration, you need to identify all the hard problems that your system solves, and do a proof of concept that they can be solved reliably with ZIO. And then then make the final decision. The easy parts are easy. migrating from Akka HTTP to ZIO HTTP, migrating from Akka streams to ZIO streams, it's almost no-brainer. But the hard parts with event sourcing and Akka cluster are the are the big question.
Thank you, Jakub. Oh, and yeah, and also everyone stick around. We have a couple of announcements at the end too, which you might find interesting. But yes, any other sort of closing thoughts from Jan, Michael, Ivan?
I guess, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
If there is anything that I can add, goes along the lines of what Jakub has suggested. Find the actual core problems where Akka was the best solution, the absolute best solution. Try to rethink about those problems. I can guarantee that probably 50% of those didn't actually need a clustering solution that powerful. For the remaining 50%, I would probably suggest actually evaluate if the Akka license would be fine for a small cluster, if that suits your need. I think if you are to the point of having to run a 50 machine, 6 core, 8 cores per machine cluster, then kind of the fees that you could negotiate would pay for a lot of development, and probably you could, like, it would cost pretty much the same to either run it for a year or two or swap the system. Clearly, licenses are always a cumulative thing. So like you're paying per year. If you rewrite something to a better solution or to a better model, I would say, because most of what we are talking is not migrating precisely to ZIO, but to a different model that is not 100% based on actor event sourcing and everything, then you might, I mean, in my experience, like the infrastructural costs went down 50% just by the first refactoring, while we were still using Akka for the cluster part and ZIO, but like 3 years ago, ZIO for the rest. That was already 50% less cost on infrastructure, on pure infrastructure. So thinking about migrating parts of the system is a very good idea, but maybe not migrating 100% if you don't have to.
That sounds impeccably reasonable to me. Jan, Ivan, any big summarizing?
I don't know if it's big, but yeah, I can only second what was previously said. With start with the complicated bits. You know, if you can solve the most complicated bits with ZIOs, then yeah, the simple ones you can also do. And also, at least what's for us important, because yeah, I always mention readability, which is actually, you know, when you need to onboard a new developer, so that you can have code that's, you know, easier to onboard new people. Because, you know, I don't know if it's in the future is going to be easier to get, you know, Akka developers now. Maybe it's even going to be, you know, more difficult. So yes,
makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to learn Akka and COBOL. Jan, any final thoughts?
Yeah. I think two things I'd like to mention. One is on the distributed side, just an anecdote of our own system where we needed a cluster singleton, which again is a thing that Akka sort of has out of the box. But since we were already using Kafka, we actually just created a topic there, had nothing on there, and just have a listener and have Kafka take care of just picking whichever node happens to be allowed to listen on the topic where nothing ever arrives. But the one that's picked is apparently the one that is currently the leader. And then, you know, we have that actually kick off some ZIO task that does the cluster singleton thing. And that was enough for us. But then again, you're writing your own state management and you get that wrong 3 or 4 times and you have 2 leaders running. So that's even though it's a little amount of code, it's still something I'd like to see somewhere down. The other point is that has not been my experience that migrating from Akka streams to ZIO streams has been smooth, not in version 1 and not version 2 either. And I think what I'm slowly starting to see is an architectural difference where Akka streams are very much component based. You have this graph stage with a couple of inputs, couple of outputs, and it's sort of, you would always call it an actor, something that gets stuff in, gets stuff out, and you can sort of reason about that. And now with ZIO2, we have a channel which is a little bit like that, except it always has only one input and output, and you can't directly construct it. You have to sort of make it from a factory in sort of a couple of different shapes that don't really have that much in common. And that makes it, for complicated streaming systems with Akka, where I have a graph stage that has 2 inputs and 1 output, that is very hard to represent currently in the ZIO world. And if you then also look at the things that are not Z stream, like Z pipeline, for example, if I have an instance of Z pipeline, I can't say .map. I can't have the outputs mapped to something else. Operator doesn't exist. There's Z pipeline.map, but there's an object method which gives its own Z pipeline, and then you can sort of kind of make it work. But there, it's like the component-based nature of it is starting to be there, but not quite yet. That's just as a little nudge to try and give that another overhaul, because sure, but Z pipeline, you have to think, where do I put all the methods? Do they go in the object or the class or both? Do they call into each other? And there's no one answer, but at least there ought to be some direction there.
Hopefully we got to spend some time together on that.
Amazing. Okay, well, clearly, I don't know if you can all see the question numbers, but they were way higher. We probably would have been here for another 3 hours, which I would love to do, but in the interest of everyone, our friends in Europe where it's getting sleepy and whatnot, we should probably wrap things up. However, a few final notes. First of all, any of the questions that weren't answered, we've been collecting those, so we're gonna wrap those all up and maybe collapse similar ones together and write up some answers from at least our behalf. So we'll make that available in case you had some very particular nuanced, maybe technical question that we didn't get a chance to talk about today. Other than that, thank you so very much to all the panel people, Jan, John, Michael, Jakub, Adam, Ivan. It's been a pleasure, and for some of you, I know every Friday, Adam and I usually take this time slot to just talk about code and decode things. Ivan, in particular, it's very interesting to me that your project, you said it was open source. Maybe yes, at some point you could join us again and we can go into more detail and actually look at some code and poke on some things together if you're interested.
Yeah, sure, because you're probably going to find lots of places that need improvement.
Yeah, we'll fix all the bugs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, and obviously similar invitation to anyone else who would like to join us and chat about some code. But other than that, thank you so much, panelists, and thank you to our benefactors of ZiVerge and Scala C, who have sponsored this event in various ways. All the behind the scenes work from Sandra and Agata and others. To obviously schedule this event and make sure a lot of people came and got to talk and ask questions. But also, we have one link for everyone, which I'm sure will be posted momentarily in the Discord and the Zoom, or you can just remember it and spell it into your own browser, which is akkaalternatives.com, where one word, akkaalternatives.com, where you should find a download link, which is actually going to point you to give your email and answer some questions. And if you do that, you're going to receive a link next week with an ebook that's been written by John and Adam and Jakub, and also our friend Alex Yaffe, about migrating with all sorts of technical details, etc. I believe it's like somewhere like between 40 and 60 pages. So hopefully that helps answer some of those nitty-gritty technical details that we haven't been able to address here, if you're interested in migrating. And by the way, speaking also of the fact that we are ZiVerge and Scala C mostly putting out that book, it's no surprise. John also outlined our business model, which is that we love open source and we'd like to write open source. And the way we don't put ourselves into an economic bind of forcing ourselves to put that open source behind some kind of closed door is we're consultants, boring, tried and true. good coders who like to code and help other people with their code. So if you're in some situation where you have a lot of Akka code and you need some help porting it over potentially to ZIO, then reach out to ZiVerge and Scala C. I think we have some, probably I'm going to guess, links on akkaalternatives.com if you'd like to put some of that that cluster money to a good cause, and we can help you out. And I think we also have like a free hour consulting as well. So if you just want us to chat with you, maybe a consultation. So if you want us to just chat with you about your problems and see if we can help you, don't fear. We're not going to charge you by the core for that hour. So yeah, besides that, we have some events coming up. Oh my God. So hopefully we get to see some of you in person, fellow panelists, at either maybe the hackathon in October. I don't know if anyone can make it to New York, but I don't have to go far at all. I'm so excited. That's where I live. So the ZIO hackathon is coming up. And what day of October is that, John? Do you know? I should have looked this up before.
28th, right?
The 28th. It's at the, oh yes, it's like very close to Halloween. So put on your best, wear your Scala staircase costume, and come on down. That's totally free. Or join us from the internet. And there's a whole bunch of, we've been doing it for a few years now, and it's super fun. We're going to talk to you about ZIO and do workshops and help you make some open source pull requests that will not be put behind closed source in the future. Even better, the best kind of open source. And also there's Functional Scala 2022, last year's of which Jan has his talk on his experience migrating from Akka to ZIO. So check that talk out as well, and hopefully join us at the Royal Geographic Society in London if that's an easy trek for you. And we'll put some links out to that as well. I think links for all this stuff is on akkaalternatives.com. But yeah, I think, so schedule some free consultations. Think about ZIO as a solution. Join us every Friday into perpetuity to talk about Scala code. It'll always be free and hopefully fun. And yeah, if nothing else, just enjoy coding. I hope your migrations go well. I hope you don't owe a big bill for your side project. Any closing thoughts from anyone else? John, Adam?
Oh, just thanks everyone for coming. I hope you enjoy the ebook we worked hard on, and then whatever sort of Q&A, we'll try to get to all your questions eventually and put in some sort of download that you can get access to. Please, if you are involved in some sort of Akka project and you look at different ZIO projects and are like, hey, I don't know if I can make this work, reach out, because one of the things that we do is we talk with people, we learn from them, and we take that knowledge and we invested back into the ZIO open source ecosystem. That's why ZIO has so many different projects out there covering different areas. It's because people are coming to us and saying, hey, we need this, we need this, we need this. So your feedback can help power the gap that exists right now between the ZIO ecosystem and the Akka ecosystem. If you need something, if it doesn't exist, reach out and talk to us, because who knows, maybe it's in development already. And if it's not in development, we at least want to know where to prioritize resources going forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure in coming Fridays, Adam and I will probably investigate some, Shardcake, other solutions, and see, like, in the code with some open source remnants to share exactly how you might solve some of these problems. Because talking about it's one thing, coding is another. So let's do that in the future. Please join us. And yeah, other than that, have a great evening, everybody, or afternoon or morning. Goodbye, world.